All right, we're here with Victoria. Just let me quickly introduce Victoria is and her husband Herb are very close to my father. And Victoria is a very educated person, and she always makes me feel stupid every time we meet because she helps me expand my vocabulary. And I've enjoyed her friendship when my dad was alive, but even more so now that he's passed, that you can look back and laugh about different things.
Actually, it's wonderful because uh, Garrett's dad used to introduce me to his patients as his sister.
Yeah.
But I really feel like Garrett is a nephew. It's wonderful because Herbert and I don't have children of our own. And it's just really nice to have Garrett and Me to it's a special thing. It's not like with little children. Adult children are really rewarding.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've watched him grow up.
Watch with me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get into that. But let me just say one funny story. I remember we were working at the flea market,
Yeah.
and they thought you were the boss because you look so old. They thought you were the expert.
Oh,
They thought you were the expert at antiques.
that was because that's a Chinese thing.
You-
But it was really, really funny because I know nothing about antiques.
Yeah, but they thought you were the one who was in charge of them, not some kid like me.
But you remember when they'd ask, Garrett would give a price and they'd turn to me and say, is that a good price? And I just say, this is your lucky day.
So, anyways, yes.
I didn't say yes or no, but I
So-
can know.
So, Victoria, we'll start a little bit. We will start with maybe a little about your life. We will talk about maybe your experience with your first marriage that I thought was very interesting.
It's a little personal, but
But if you can share as much as you want to share, maybe the part that I like.
well, this is pretty cautionary. That's why I'm going to go into it.
And then we'll finish off with Ronald.
I was impressed by this young man because he was into New Age things. And, he could hypnotize. He could do all sorts of things.
Well, we'll get there. How about this? Why don't you just talk about a little bit your upbringing, maybe when you,
Okay. Well,
because you grew up in D.C., right?
oh no,
No, sorry. You moved to D.C. You grew up in Louisiana first.
that's right.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, I was born in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. My father was teaching at the Command and General Staff School because he'd been wounded in Anzio in World War II. And he was a full colonel, but he didn't want a desk job. He wanted to be active. So those were the days when veterans got real benefits. So he went on the GI Bill back to Iowa State College in those days and got his doctorate in genetics and animal husbandry and became superintendent of this livestock experimental station in Louisiana, crossbreeding cattle. And he'd grown up mostly in the South, and when the wonderful foreman who probably saved the lives of my brothers and me by telling my father that we shouldn't play in the silo anymore. We'd had several really dangerous experiences there. But anyway, he retired, and the most qualified person was African American. This was a federal station
Where is this?
in Louisiana.
Okay, okay.
But this is 1958.
1958 or 48?
58.
So you're like,
after 1954.
so you're like 10
Brown.
years old.
I'm 12.
12. Okay.
Brown versus Board of Education. It should have been protected. My father promoted the African American over the white man who wanted the job.
Hold on, let me turn off this thing real quick. My laundry machine's going crazy.
Oh yeah, she is.
Too loud. Sorry, go ahead.
So
Victoria.
he wasn't exactly fired, but he was sent to Beltsville, and that's how I came to this area. We lived in Silver Spring. My father was in Beltsville.
What year did you move to DC?
1958, and it was a real adjustment. It was. I really felt literally uprooted. I didn't like the way the earth looked here. It was red clay instead of Delta black loam. It didn't smell like sugar cane and snakes. It smelled kind of astringent.
How's the humidity compared to Louisiana?
Oh, nothing's worse than Louisiana.
How's the mosquitoes compared to Louisiana?
Nothing's worse than Louisiana. But I developed a kind of immunity, which is
To what?
because I love to garden to mosquitoes and insects. They don't bother me, and I don't mind the heat.
And you don't need gardening gloves either.
I don't like them. I probably should have them because I'm a manicurist nightmare. Look at my hands.
Yeah, you have barely fingernails. It's all
Yeah.
that digging in the dirt.
Yeah,
Is
all
that what
that
it is?
rooting around, yeah.
Real quick, my mother-in-law thought you were nuts for not wearing gloves while doing weeding.
Well, you know what I've discovered?
Mhm.
Well, weeding, yes. I did get a few little scratches, but there's some chemical in the earth that is actually an antidepressant. I thought I loved to garden because of the fresh air and sunshine and the bird song, but apparently I was getting something out of the soil that was making
No, I
me
believe
feel
that.
good. Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
I believe
So,
it.
so that's the only medication I've ever
Mhm.
taken that I,
Okay.
except for an occasional antibiotic your father had prescribed. Yeah, but it was anyway. That's how I came up here, and then because of my father's expertise in tropical agriculture, we went from Beltsville to places like Paraguay and Peru and Nigeria
As a kid?
as a teen.
As a teen?
Uh-huh.
Mm.
So
Now, what high school did you go to?
Montgomery Blair.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, then when I was abroad, I took correspondence courses. I came back. I was put behind a grade because I missed a semester of chemistry.
So you went to Blair, and then you went and you studied English literature, or was that a master? I forget. Was that undergrad?
Undergrad. Well, I started out as a piano major.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And I did not really want to teach, and I didn't. I was shy, and I wasn't a show off. I didn't want to do the concert thing, and also it took up a tremendous amount of time practicing. And I remember thinking, I just don't want to sacrifice myself on this particular altar, because it really to be good enough to perform, you have to practice many hours a day, and much as I love music. And then I got engaged, and so I wanted and married, and I wanted to get through school as soon as possible. So I thought English major would be essential. It was.
Mm-hmm.
And because of living in South America, I minored in Spanish literature, and that worked out okay. But the marriage wasn't a good one.
Oh, okay. I guess we're getting to that. So Victoria,
So
you don't have to get into all the details,
no, but
but
the first anniversary, I found out that the New Age stuff was not harmless.
wait, let me rewind real quick. You told me that when you met your first husband, he was able to impress you because he was able to tell you things that he shouldn't have known. You remember that?
No, when we were engaged, he was in another country, and he would write me things like he would describe the room I'd been in and people I'd seen. I thought, well,
that's impossible.
No, not if you're into the occult.
I mean,
but I just thought,
yeah,
and I could
because you didn't tell him these things. No. He just knew.
And sometimes I'd feel him in the room with me. I couldn't, and I just thought he was a special person, and he was quite brilliant, and he wrote wonderful poetry. But you can't dabble in these things.
When you say the cult,
yeah,
talking about like what kind of religion? These like ancestral pagan?
No, well, this stuff would be theosophy.
What is that?
That's what this is.
Okay.
It's a garbled thing, but it's considered gray magic. But there's an interesting book by an exorcist for the city of Rome, Padre Gabriel M.E.A.T.
I saw his movie.
Did you really?
Yeah,
okay.
It's a little scary.
Well,
the Vatican's top exorcist. I've read his books actually.
Yeah, and he was saying there really isn't white and gray magic. That it leads you into things that if you
it's all bad.
It's all bad. Yeah, and of course, magic is people want a quick fix.
So you were drawn to him partially because he had this.
I thought he was superior because I thought he was very spiritual. Because I had no real spiritual grounding. And
so you married him?
I married him, and but the first anniversary, these demons came out, and I saw them. Scared the life out of me.
No, let me rewind a little bit. Because from what I remember, you said that after you got married, it was hell.
Yes.
And that was kind of like blindsided you. Tell me about that.
Well,
like you moved there and it wasn't the same. It wasn't what you expected. Am I correct? The marriage? He had changed a little bit.
Yes. And, I think he had done some bad things. And between the time I'd last seen him, but I went ahead with it, and but the thing is, it may have been but then we were babysitting for psychiatrists, and he saw a good psychiatrist, and he decided to go back to his country, and we ended it pretty much. But it really was ended on the first anniversary because I realized I'd got something really, really dreadful.
Yeah, tell me about that. You told me your husband was screaming, saying he was imagining things, having whatever these episodes.
I thought he was imagining things till I was focused on him screaming, trying to calm him. Then I turned around and I saw the same thing he did.
And what was that? This is in the bedroom or whatever?
Yeah, no, it looked like Iroquois masks, kind of.
Those are those like, what are those like those African masks? Is that when you say, what is Iroquois?
We had African masks, which were probably also a bad idea. He had me take them down.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were interesting as art. I'd lived in Nigeria, and we went to this place where they made coffins, and they had all these masks. But they were really used in rituals. They were not good things. And so he had me take those down. And in the middle of the night, 3 a.m, we went to a Catholic friend's house and knocked on the door. They came out astonished, but he wanted a rosary. And then he calmed down when he got the rosary.
So what did you see on the wall that made you realize that maybe it's not his imagination, maybe there's some legitimacy to it?
I was like seeing a person. I mean, and seeing something that chilled you to the bone, just sheer evil, But then that's when it's funny. You would think believing in God would precede believing the devil exists, but once you've seen the devil, you turn
So
to God.
you think you saw a spirit or a demon?
Yeah, I have no doubt of it. And
no doubt.
No, and that doesn't mean other people can't doubt me. I'm sure they do. Well, what a dingbat. But, no, this was a very, very real experience.
How old were you?
I was 21. 22.
So what did you do after you saw that demon? Did you run out the room?
No.
You guys pray? I don't know.
No, I was just frozen in terror. It was a little bit like in Louisiana when I'd almost step on a snake or something. You just freeze.
Okay.
And anyway, it took me a while to choose a religion. And on Sundays, as you know, I'd go to Ronald McDonald House.
You were doing this in the 20s?
No, this was later in my 30s.
Okay. So,
from 1980 to 2000, I spent Sundays at Ronald McDonald House.
1980s to 2000.
That's 20.
So that's like when you're in your 35 years old or 30s.
Yeah, well, it was my childbearing years that were slipping past, and that was good for me because I could see that, instead of wandering around department stores looking at baby clothes and feeling sorry for myself, I remarried.
So were you married when you went to Ronald McDonald House?
Oh, yeah, but I was married the second time.
But you didn't have kids, okay.
No, I didn't have children. And
when was your conversion, by the way? Was that after your second marriage, third or second?
Yes. And it's interesting. I was converting gradually through Ronald McDonald House because I noticed the Catholics seem to be able to endure suffering so much better than the other denominations.
So I'm trying to, now it's making sense. So you went to McDonald's house. Also at the same time, I think you told me you were reading books such as G.K. Chesterton, which was insightful to you.
Oh, yeah.
Enlightening.
Yes. Chesterton, and of course, your favorite.
What's that? Everlasting Man?
Yes.
I can't read.
Yeah.
That was the hardest book I've ever attempted to read. I will never read it. No, it's beyond my intelligence.
I read his friend Hilaire Belloc. I read a lot of things, but also C.S. Lewis. I know you like him.
So you were at McDonald's. Screw tape letters.
Because again, he takes on the devil. I mean, there is God, and then there's the opposition to God.
I made all the kids read that.
Good.
And then and one of their assignments was to write themselves a letter to see so that they can understand their own vices.
That's a marvelous idea.
And then to give them an example, I wrote a letter to each of them as pretending I was Screw Tape to show my understanding of their flaws. And I asked them, "Would you agree with this?" They go, "Yeah, Garrett, this is pretty much me." So anyways, it's the introspection that is important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I try to guide them in introspection using that book.
Yeah. Well, now that I joined the Third Order of the Carmelites, which you don't just join, you have to go through 7 or 8 years of formation. But St. John of the Cross uses a wonderful analogy. Is it's like never cleaning a window or turning on the lights. You think you're fine. But when you start to try to know yourself, you become more humble because you're seeing yourself better. You're not a worse person.
I don't need that. I'm married. I kind of get it.
Well, actually, marriage is wonderful that way if the person's on your side and not trying to hurt you. But the thing is, really,
Yeah, I
you
know.
do need that. You need a
Mm.
parent who will guide you.
I got
And,
plenty of material to
yeah,
reflect upon.
right.
So
Yeah.
you worked at Ronald McDonald House. It was now tell me. So I want to hear that. This is a great story, Victoria. You shared many times. When did that conversion at the beach happen? Was this
Okay.
what year was this?
Oh my goodness, this was 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
So you were Ronald McDonald's house to 2000, and then you got converted.
After that.
So you're like
But I was
40.
being influenced by conversations.
You're like 45 at that time.
I was past 50. I was 55 when I went to Mexico with my Mexican sister-in-law, and it was pretty wild. We even got chased by the police. That's when I realized she was bipolar.
Bible. Okay.
Yeah, but I just thought she was a hot tamale with a temper.
So you became converted. When you say converted, kind of more
I
religious to devout Catholicism.
I had to choose. I finally made the decision. Because
tell us about that story about the beach.
Yes, so we went all the way down to we drove from Washington D.C. to Acapulco. We stayed
Washington D.C. to Acapulco. How far is that?
That's
3,000 miles, 2,000 miles.
Oh, well, we had 3 weeks to do this in, and we'd stay at her relatives. It was wonderful. Doing it that way, meeting all these people, because she was from a fascinating family of artists.
Were you married at this time?
I was between marriages.
So it's between number 2 and 3.
Yes. Well, don't call Herbert number. Number. I consider Herbert my only husband because he's the only one I married in the church.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. We want to respect Catholic theology.
Yeah. No, but
it doesn't count.
But
you had the only one you had holy matrimony with.
And it's really interesting. No, really, because the other two had been brought up Catholic, but didn't want to marry me in the church. So it tells me the sense of commitment wasn't the same.
I'm sure. Of course, it's very different when you're a practicing Catholic versus not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they didn't want me to convert either. So this is what really delayed it, ironically enough. But anyway, so we get to Acapulco, and my sister-in-law has been giving me lots and lots of instructions. And it was fine to a point, but you get a little tired. And I hadn't been by myself for 3 weeks. And she smoked, and I loved her dearly, and I still do. But I'm an introvert. I mean, you can't just be with someone perpetually without wanting to get away. And so I said I wanted to go into the water. We were going to her sister's apartment, and so she warned me about the riptide.
What city is this again?
Acapulco.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know, but okay, this is in Mexico.
This is in Mexico. Yes. And she was always warning me about things, and I was always doing things against her advice, and it was just fine. Like I went all over Mexico City without getting mugged, and
you do speak Spanish.
And I speak Spanish, and I knew better than to dress up in my best clothes, and that kind of thing. And I took public transportation. We had a wonderful time. But I looked for a place on the beach where I could be by myself when nobody was. And that was really stupid because there's only one reason a part of the beach would be abandoned. It would be because it was dangerous. And there was a big sign, but it was facing the hotels because the people in the apartments knew. I didn't know what the sign said. It said, beware of don't go in this water because of the riptide. Well, I go in the water. It just feels wonderful. I'm happy as a clam until I want to come back, and I can't. And I'm getting farther and farther out, and the waves are higher and higher. Oh, but we skipped something. She did take me to see the tomb of Our Lady of Guadalupe.
Okay.
That was just a couple of days before. And
is that a religious?
Yes, Our Lady of Guadalupe. There were no converts to Christianity at first, and partly because of Cortez and the soldiers treated, they were terrible. But Christianity, of course, wasn't terrible. And the Aztecs, the people were lucky to be freed from Aztec domination because the human sacrifice went on every day, hour by hour. It was really, really horrible. But anyway, this Aztec convert had a vision of Our Lady of the Blessed Virgin, and She told him that she wanted a chapel built. So he goes to the bishop, and the bishop doesn't believe him. He had trouble getting in. But then the bishop says, I just want a sign of who she is. So he actually is supposed to go back to see her, and he decides he'll go in the other direction. He just really doesn't want this job. You know how Jonah was.
Reluctant.
Yeah. And she meets him, and he said he needs a sign. So she takes off the tilma, sort of a head covering, and she fills it with roses, which this was December. They weren't blooming. So he takes it back, and when the roses come out, everyone's amazed. But also an imprint of her was on the mantle, the tilma, and it had so many Aztec symbols that there's mass conversions. You know, all the symbols that appealed to the people. The serpent under her feet, for instance, that goes back to
Genesis chapter 3.
Yeah, but she crushed the serpent, the new Eve. You know?
Yes.
And there were all these different symbols that appealed to them. Anyway, this is displayed in Mexico City in the cathedral, and I'd been told, oh, you go up an escalator and it's so commercial and you won't like it. But when I went up, it was as if time stopped. And I looked at her at the face, and I thought, it doesn't seem like a painting. It seems like a real person I'm looking at. And I thought, again, like my story of my driver's test, it's sometimes time just sort of stops, you know, and it seems to. And I remember thinking, that is the saddest face I've ever seen that was calm. And then I thought, no, she looks like she's listening. She's listening to everybody's problems. Everybody were asking her to intercede for them. And then I had the sense she wanted me to ask her for something. I couldn't think of anything.
Okay.
Until I was in Riptide.
You heard the rip. Okay, this is like a few days later.
Yeah.
Swimming, go ahead.
And again, time kind of stopped. I remembered that, and I was going out, and I thought, I think this is it for me. You know.
Did you say that calmly?
Really? And
you sound so calm when you say that.
And it was really, it was strange how calm I was. And I remember thinking, this might not be such a bad thing.
That you're getting pulled away into
I'm
the ocean.
55 years old.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, I'm not married. Nobody needs me. I have no children. And think about it. No muss, no fuss, no funeral.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I'll be remembered when I'm still good looking. I mean, all of these things, you know. And then all of a sudden,
that's a very creative mind of yours. way to stay positive.
Yeah. And then you know what really did it? I thought, my poor sister-in-law, she's going to come down. She's going to be looking for me. Mm-hmm. She's going to have to explain to my brother and my family, and she's done everything she can. She took me to see anything I wanted to see.
Yes.
And her family took me in, and she doesn't deserve this. This is.
She doesn't want to have that blood. You don't want her to have that blood on her hands, huh?
No, and the embarrassment, and you know, the whole thing. You know, I thought this is a really bad repayment for so much kindness. You know.
So because of her.
It was really because of her. Mm-hmm. And I did not know when I returned, I was going to find out that my mother did need me, that she'd just been diagnosed with cancer, or that Herbert was going to want to marry me. And these are a lot of things I didn't know.
Sure, of course.
But so I asked her, I said, well, if you want to do something for me, get me out of this if you can.
You're talking to the saint. What's her name?
Mary, the Virgin.
Oh, you're talking to Virgin Mary when you prayed.
Mary.
Okay.
So I go under, and the waves are getting really deep, you know. Okay. And I was having to hold my breath until I'd come up out of it. And I see somebody racing across the sand, and I was getting tired, but I waved. He waved back. He comes out, and I need to make this a little snappier.
Oh, you're fine. Yeah.
And fortunately, my older brother had worked on getting a merit badge in life saving, and I knew he had practiced on me, and I knew to turn over on my back and how to help him.
How to be rescued.
Yeah, how to be rescued. And then we got halfway through, and I could see the lifeguard was getting tired when another guard came out. Okay, and they got me to the beach, and they told me, don't lie down. Walk up and down the beach, because if you lie down, your heart will stop.
Okay.
So I'm there, and who's coming but my sister-in-law and her daughter. And so they're coming along the beach, and they come up to me and they accuse me of flirting with the lifeguards.
Mm-hmm.
But it was really, really almost, it was really strange because the next few days I felt like I was a stranger to the earth, as if I shouldn't be there. It was quite something.
Tell the part when you asked the lifeguard.
Oh, the next day. By the way, before I had gone out,
That's a missing part of the story.
that's missing. That's an important part too. I had slipped a $50 bill that I just happened to have, along with Mexican money. So I thought, oh, I really should thank him and I should give him a reward. So
Sure, of course.
I found him, and he didn't want to accept it. For one thing, he said there was a big campaign against bribery in Mexico at that time as well. I told him in Spanish, I think my life is worth more than $50. This is not really a bribe. I just want to show appreciation.
That's true. Okay.
But then he said, but you don't realize I was guilty of dereliction of duty. I said, what do you mean? He said, there was supposed to be a lifeguard there at all times, but nobody ever came to that part of the beach. I was hungry. My replacement had not come. So I went off, and he said, I was just biting into a sandwich. All of a sudden, I just knew. He said, I just knew I had to get back. And he said, I dropped the sandwich and ran.
Really?
And I told him my story, and he crossed himself. He knew. His life was saved in a way. He would never gotten a job as a lifeguard again if anything had happened.
So you're saying you think God intervened by kind of tugging at his conscience?
I think, yeah.
And he came running back and he saw you.
Yeah. And I know that he was running first because I saw him running and I waved, remember? So.
I don't know if you're waving or crying for help.
I didn't say a word. I just waved. I didn't have the energy to cry out.
How long were you out there in the water?
I don't know. I just don't know.
But you're a decent swimmer. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah, I'm a good swimmer.
You're a good swimmer. So this was something.
However, I didn't know something that Herbert told me later. He said I should have tried to swim. Yeah. If I'd known that. No, but I don't think so, because by the time I realized it, I was really far out. And it was apparently not that long before a German who'd been at the hotel who should have seen the sign went out because he was such a good swimmer, and he drowned. So anyway,
so that was your conversion. That was your pivotal. That was your road to Damascus.
Yeah, and I never wondered again whether is there anything wrong in asking help from Our Lady and all that. And I ask her all the time. She says, I think she's wonderful since. I won't say I wasn't close to my mother, but my mother wasn't the kind of person. She wasn't very motherly. We loved each other, but I wouldn't say she was a motherly person. And I turn to Our Lady all the time.
When you say Our Lady, you mean the Virgin Mary?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not as familiar with the Catholic terminology.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just really nice to have. Okay. And it's not worshiping, because we know that she's not divine. She's a creature.
It's an intercessor. Is that what it is?
Intercessor. Yeah. And the saints too. And I told you that thing about St. Jude and my driving test.
Yeah. Sometimes I pray with the Asian women before we drive.
Oh, yeah.
Evelyn and
well, as I told you, Herb thought I was going to kill him. He taught me to drive, but that proved to me he cared about my mother and he cared about me. But he had to get the car away from her, and I had to learn to drive.
So during this time, you're volunteering at Ronald McDonald's house, and you're working at Library of Congress, right? Any funny stories from Library of Congress? Probably.
I'm not sure I'm going to think about them right now. Oh, you want something funny?
Anything interesting from that time? How many years ago?
Well, I have funny stories from Ronald McDonald.
Oh, yeah, sure. Ronald McDonald. Actually, wasn't there a girl you mentored or something?
Oh, this was the one that made your father laugh so hard.
Yeah.
And you were talking about trying to teach someone
to drive.
To drive is like trying to teach someone tone deaf to sing.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah.
Okay, this was a precious little girl, and she got through, and she got into remission from leukemia, and she had to go back to school.
Time out. Let me ask you, Ron, because I'm not familiar. What does the charity do or specialize in?
They call themselves a home away from home. What it is, insurance often pays for medical treatment, but not for lodging and travel. And when children with life-threatening diseases often have to stay at at a place for as long as 6 months, and the family has to stay somewhere. And what happened? This is around the late 70s in Philadelphia. One of the daughter of one of the Philadelphia Eagles, that team, she had leukemia, and the teammates would go with him to visit the little girl, and they'd see all these families sleeping in the hallways.
So is that where Ronald McDonald House Charity kind of?
Well, they bought a house for these families. They sort of bonded with these people. People become very close when they're in the same predicament.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, and so they bought this house, and then they soon found that it was really expensive to maintain, and so they started to appeal to different charities. And with McDonald's, they just had one St. Patrick's Day, a green milkshake or something. They gave the proceeds. But when I went there in 1980, ours was the 6th house in the country, the Washington, D.C. one.
Where was this in the country?
Well, this was in northeast Washington, D.C., in Brookland.
Okay.
The first one was in Philadelphia.
Okay. So how? Yeah. Tell me something about that girl.
Oh, okay. But anyway, the thing is, it really took off. There was a nominal fee for the families, and it could even be waived for them to be able to stay there. Now, they will stay a few months and have to leave.
Of course.
But they would have the kitchen, and they'd have a van driver to take them to the hospital. You see all these wonderful things. And volunteer groups would come in and cook breakfast on Sundays. That was usually the day.
What was your role? Was it piano? What did you do?
All sorts of things. I was a Sunday relief manager, which meant that was the manager's day off.
Okay.
And so I would take people around who were coming in, help people to check out. But I often had afternoons free, and I started a garden.
Yeah.
That was very therapeutic, but they could also grow vegetables for the kitchen and herbs and things. And I would have sing-alongs with the kids to keep them from banging, and
killing themselves.
I was Mrs. Santa Claus for some Christmases, stuff like that. But so it was whatever came up, and it was really nice. And I made these lovely friendships. And this particular little girl had to come back for checkups. And one time her mother told me that she was having a little trouble in school because she wanted to be in the singing group. And even the teacher of this chorus was annoyed with her because she couldn't carry a tune. And I was thinking, can't you find something else for her to do? But the mother wanted me to teach her to sing, to carry a tune. So we started with Mary Had a Little Lamb.
How old is this girl?
She was about 9.
Okay.
By this time. And she said, it was really funny because it was like telling someone to put their foot somewhere. I would press a key on the piano and say, sing this, and she'd sing something else. So I would press that key and says, can you sing that? And then she'd sing something else. And I said, no, sing the one you did when you were supposed to be. It was like trying to get someone to step somewhere, and it was kind of frustrating. But by the end of the afternoon, she was able to sing Mary Had a Little Lamb. It just took patience. But she was almost inaudible. And I said, you're going to have to sing a little louder than that. And she said,
she's very shy.
Oh, yes. She hardly had much confidence, And she said, I can't. And I said, I've heard you when you're playing, and I've heard you scream. And Pavarotti, meaning Luciano Pavarotti, says that singing is controlled screaming. Well, this gentle.
My wife doesn't sing that. She just screams, I guess. I don't think it's control. It's out of control.
Give her some music to follow it. Because, yeah.
I think okay, that is funny. This controlled screaming.
Well, yeah. I mean, you really have to produce volume. And
I'm gonna guide my wife.
This little girl, though, who was always so soft-spoken and so gentle and so sweet, got highly indignant. She said, I don't care what he says. So I said, what do you mean? She says, he's a horrible, horrible person.
Okay.
And I said, well, he does know about singing.
Yes.
And she's starting to get hysterical. And boy, she was screaming now. Says, I don't care. He's too horrible. I don't care. And I said, what did he do, honey? And then she says, don't you know he killed Princess Diana?
What?
She thought he was the paparazzi.
Oh, Okay, this is like
This would be in the 1980s.
1997 or something.
It would be, yeah, the 1990s.
Okay.
It would be after Princess died. It would
Yes.
be around 1997. You're right, yeah.
Mhm.
She was so upset. I told your father that. I thought he'd roll on the floor.
Mhm.
But it was, there would be these, and then there'd be those things with the kids where we'd have these reunions. And remember, we were talking about how people bond when they're in the same situation. They were the most,
All these kids are sick. Are they all cancer? Or it doesn't matter what disease.
anything life-threatening. Also, children who had hand surgery.
And
but
that
you wanted
that
to keep them
location,
away from other people.
that location is close to Children's Hospital. Is that what it
Yes,
was
yes,
for?
yeah,
Okay.
And but these people formed really strong friendships, and we'd have reunions every year. And it's interesting, you could really feel the grace of God when you walked in. You could feel the angels, you know. And people would say, "Isn't it depressing?" And I'd say, "Well, actually, there's something really wonderful, you know, there." Uh, of course, I mean, I wouldn't call it depressing. Sometimes real grief, you know, if a child died unexpectedly. But after a while, I could kind of tell who was going to pull through and who wasn't. Um, it generally had something to do with how alert they were. The ones that were going to move on to another world became very detached, and they had a look in their eyes like someone kind of watching a boat coming through, and they became incredibly mature. I remember I went to Disney World, and there was a little boy who uh, went about the same time. I didn't see him there, but Make-A-Wish Foundation. And when he'd first come, it took months for them to fulfill his wish.
Right.
Came back, and I wanted to talk to him about everything at Disney World.
Mhm.
And he looked at me with the gravest little face, and he said, "It really wasn't very interesting."
Okay.
Yeah, he was. So his name was, he couldn't, his name was Robert, and he would call himself Wobbert. And
Okay.
then he'd say, "My name is Wobbert, but it's not really Wobbert because I can't pronounce my oh."
Yes.
He was just as precious as could be. But I remember looking in his face and thinking, he's light years ahead of me in maturity, you know. And he had only months to go. And it really wasn't diagnosed that quickly. I remember another time, a child, I was really shocked this time.
You're saying these diseases really gave them some supernatural perspective. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
These
they were being matured, you know, they were too good for this world.
Mm-hmm.
There was one boy who became almost too beautiful to look at.
Too beautiful to look at. Okay.
Yeah. And it turned out that he was in excruciating pain, but he was hiding it so his parents wouldn't be upset. And so he could come to the house on Sundays, you know, from the hospital. And the doctor was incredulous because he knew he had to be in pain given the advanced state of his disease. And so the doctor hid in the house, and then he saw that when no one was around, the boy was limping because he had bone cancer.
Yeah.
And he slapped him back in the hospital, you know. But at the end, the mother told me this later. She was really grieving horribly. She said she'd go down the street and she'd hate every woman she saw, think, "Your child isn't dying of cancer, you know, mine is." And when I saw her again after his death, she was very calm. And she said, well, she was holding his hand, and all of a sudden, just before he died, he opened his eyes. He said, "Mother, it's so beautiful, so beautiful." And he just looked happy, so that helped her.
Mm.
But anyway, so when people say it was depressing, it was very mixed.
I get it.
Yeah,
It's probably.
But people would come back for these things, and sometimes I wouldn't recognize the kids because they'd grown, and the kids don't know how much they've changed, you know. And if I pretended to recognize them and I didn't, they knew.
But they knew you.
And they'd say, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I'd have to throw myself on the mercy of the court because there's no way you could. No, you can't.
So, what is your best takeaway from some of your most fond memories of Ronald McDonald House, or your reflections?
One time I was playing the piano, and I didn't know anyone was around, and I was playing something very beautiful by one of Bach's sons called Rondo something or other. And all of a sudden, I remember as I was coming to the end, I heard this cooing.
Was it like a cat?
then when I finished, I looked around and there were these different couples with babies in their arms, and the babies were loving it. And I remember thinking, this means more to me than playing at Carnegie Hall and having people paid a lot of money just pretend to like it, or clap. This really.
So does Ron McDonald? Why are the babies sick? Is that what it is?
Baby's sick, but also sometimes people have babies and it's an older child that's sick. You had the siblings also had their problems. There's one girl who was stealing money, not because she needed it, but just to get attention. Because all attention was going to her brother. It was.
So you learned what? Humility, gratitude, compassion.
I hope so. Yeah. Well, no, I really realized a new perspective on suffering. That actually God is an alchemist, and and He's turning us to gold, but we have to go through this painful process.
That sounds so discouraging. Oh man!
But you know what?
I agree. That makes sense.
I mean,
He's turning us to gold.
He gives you a break from time to time, but
I know,
but throughout your life, believe me, you're going to go through. You have to. It's part of the process.
Well,
and we don't suffer any more than he did. In fact, we can't even begin to.
We definitely don't suffer more. Hopefully not. I'm sure. Well, we are turning into gold. Those who are being sanctified, not everybody.
Actually, you have to feel sorry for the people if things are going too well for them.
I tell the kids, I think this year is going to be your year when you suffer, because I say that's really the only way that you grow is through those
and you don't
moments.
seek it. It's how you accept.
But it's inevitable.
Yeah,
that's kind of my perspective.
And you have to know how to accept joy and good fortune too. You have to know how to accept everything that comes from God.
I kind of expect a bad year every 5 years for myself.
Is that the pattern?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I see it like seasons.
I do.
Yeah. You get your spring is followed by summer and sometimes pretty darn hot. And then you have a fruitful autumn and then it's winter and everything's desolate.
Yeah, this is supposed to be a good year for me.
I hope so.
I'm supposed to have a couple of good years before it gets rough again. So I'm hoping I can enjoy this little sunshine.
Well, yeah.
My time will come again to be refined. Give me a little break though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but you can't dread it. I mean, it's just.
I can't dread it.
It's all about receptivity. That's what I got from the Carmelites. Is you do this and and humility is really very comfortable. You just don't. It's not that you're groveling and beating yourself up. It's just that you don't. God doesn't expect that much of you. Because you do the best you can. And
humility is very comfortable. That is a. Is this your quote or this sounds very funny to me? It makes sense.
Well, maybe I don't know.
That sounds very clever way of putting it.
I think, well, I'm thinking Fulton Sheen wrote something in his Piece of Soul. Mm-hmm. He said, "The bigger your ego, the more vulnerable you are." It's like carrying around a big balloon that you're afraid someone's going to bump into.
Humility is very comfortable. I guess. Let me continue my refinement process.
Well, maybe. Look, I don't know what I'm going to tell you next year, do I? And this is the thing. When I got to be around 60, and I see this with 6-year-olds. 60.
Oh, 60. Okay.
Yeah, you get these delusions of wisdom.
You get delusions of wisdom at 60. What does that mean?
It means you think that you've learned a lot and you have a lot to tell people.
I definitely feel that way.
But you're not 60.
Yeah, but I definitely go... Constantly, I look back, go, wow, I would know way more than I did 5 years ago. I constantly have this feeling.
Yeah, and of course, it's for us ladies, it's a real compensation to think that because we've lost our looks. So, but anyway,
God trading your looks for wisdom.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. But then God sees that things happen to you to set you right. No, you don't know half what you should, or you don't know anything. Mm-hmm. But the one thing about getting old that is nice is. You never run out of things to learn. There's always something. It's always interesting,
I just want to relax.
No, you're never going to. No, that's not what's going to happen.
I know. I believe you. It sounds very tiring. It sounds like a long race.
Oh, and I get tired sometimes,
Oh man, Victoria, it sounds so pleasant what you're saying, but I know it's a tough pill to swallow at times.
Don't look ahead too far now,
Hmm.
because then you get, that's when you start fretting. Well, I'm not going to be able to manage that.
Oh, I definitely fret.
Yeah,
Is fretting another word for being anxious?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So anything from working, studying English, you love to read.
Mm-hmm.
There's Library of Congress. Anything interesting from that
All sorts
that
of
time?
things. Gosh. Oh, well,
Maybe one or two points you think is kind of interesting.
like the book by the Exorcist is one I cataloged, and it was so interesting
The
that I
book by
couldn't.
the original.
The original one by
Hmm.
Padre Amort. Or
Okay. Okay.
anyway, it was so interesting. I couldn't put it down. I got locked in the building, and I had
Okay.
to get one of the security guards to let
Hmm.
me out.
Hmm.
And that happened to me more than once. And then Mother Teresa's book.
Time out.
Yeah.
You read that book after your experience with the demon,
Oh yeah.
so
Many
that must have
years
been
later.
scary then. That book must have been really scary.
No, it wasn't. The book wasn't scary.
The
It was
movie was scary.
fascinating. And I haven't seen any movie about it,
Well, they
but
do. Okay.
but the book, it was, I was able to confirm. I mean, I had the ring of truth,
Hmm.
and theologically it was interesting. For instance, he spoke about doing the exorcisms. He never would talk to the possessed person.
You're not supposed to
Yeah.
because it's a distraction. That's what I've
Yeah,
read.
yeah. But he says sometimes these young priests that were helping him were curious and would ask questions. And so he did report the answers, which were very, very interesting. I thought about this later when I saw Pirates of the Caribbean. You know that sword fight where they look, these are the people who are dead who are still
Okay,
fighting.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't remember the movie.
But a priest asked one of the possessed, the demon, he said, when people are enemies in this life, are they enemies when in hell? And the demon said, no, because there are no relationships in hell. Everyone is turned in on himself.
That is that makes sense because their ego is too big. They don't even have a relationship.
And he also said, it was a choice. Some people would rather be in hell than be humble.
I believe that's C.S. Lewis's depiction in some ways in The Great Divorce. I don't know if you read that book.
I don't think I will.
The further he goes into hell, the further that people want to move away from each other. The deeper you go to hell, he goes, he's too close to me. You got to keep. You just keep expanding further and further away from each other. The deeper you go in. So yes, kind of similar to what you're saying. There is no relationships.
I've got to read that one. Thank you.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's very good.
Oh, okay. And then the other one that really struck me is one of the young priests said, why don't you go back to that nice warm place that God prepared for you? And the demon, who was expletive, said, God had nothing to do with it. We created it ourselves. And I thought, that's nice, because so many people say, well, how could a kind God create a hell? Well, he didn't. So it's...
C.S. Lewis says this in Mere Christianity. When you meet God, you either say to him, thy will be done, or God says to them, thy will be done. So that's what you're saying, right? Either you listen to God or you do your own thing.
I didn't want to.
Yeah.
In fact, if you've ever listened to Robert Barron, he's a Catholic priest, but I can't imagine that any Protestant listening to him would find anything that would find objectionable. It's just really, really deep. And he said he thought that what they sing in hell has to be my way. You remember the words to that song that Frank Sinatra sang? I did it my way.
I'm not a expert in Frank Sinatra.
Oh yeah, he's not popular anymore.
I'm not a very cultured person.
Neither was Frank Sinatra. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but this was
Makes sense.
A really popular song for a couple of decades.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
This person is going over his life, and he's made mistakes. He's done this and that, but he did it his way. And,
yes, there is something romantic about that.
And it's the glamour of evil.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the beauty of individualism or something, but
well, that's the problem now. Is people really think that they can do things they couldn't possibly do, or that they have done things when they don't know it's the grace of God that got them through.
Okay.
And no, we're really utterly dependent. And that's also the comfort of humility. It's not thinking you're responsible for everything. You do your best, of course, but if you fail, nothing is more horrible for a proud person than to have failed. When a person isn't that proud, you're not happy about it, but it's not the same. It doesn't.
Nothing is more. What did you say again?
More painful
and for a proud person to fail.
Yeah, they got to be winners. And when I did convert, I remember someone saying to me, "Why would you want to be a Christian?" He said, "That's for losers."
That's true. Those and Bible says
yeah.
those who want to gain their life will lose it. Those who want to lose their life will gain it. So it is from the Bible.
Yeah. And this was not a bad person. Actually, he was always trying to help people. He was very active in our union, and he was trying to help. And I said, "Well, then why is it you like and want to help the losers and you don't like the winners?"
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to say. I said,
humility. It's a very attractive trait. Not an easy one to acquire.
No, and people do look down on you if they find out.
And I don't think a lot of people are actually humble. I think they're shy or timid or.
That's a form of pride.
I think what was the one?
You don't want to be rejected. Yeah. Fear of rejection and
prude. Maybe another way is saying they're not really humble. They're prude. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to put themselves out there.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with prudence either.
No, not prudence.
But
they were using a different way. Don't worry.
But it isn't. Well, there are ways, where
there's a lot of false humility.
There isn't.
I guess what I'm saying is that.
And you kind of think that about the saints and think, well, what are they talking about when they're saying they're the worst of sinners? It's just that the holier they get, the more aware of how undivine they are, how they're comparing themselves to Jesus.
That's true, of course.
And so they and they have that light. They see every defect, whereas most of us are pretty happy to sweep things under the rug and not know about them. And don't think that I'm so humble that I don't do that. Boy, oh boy, you just have to talk to my husband.
Humility.
And it is true that our spouses are the ones that keep us grounded, when we start to get delusional.
I'm definitely connected to the earth.
And I'm not talking about people who say things just to be mean, but although they do say, listen to your enemies, they'll tell you the things your friends won't tell you.
You know what? I guess I'm very lucky because my friends accept me even though I tell them the truth.
Well, you have wonderful friends then.
I know I am lucky. If you're out there and I'm mean to you, Victoria's saying that our friendship is very strong. Maybe I'm very lucky to have good friends.
Because you don't say things to be spiteful. You just, if you have an opinion, you give it. That's all.
So,
or I hope.
A lot of lessons learned. Thank you, Victoria. Humility. I'm going to tell you the story. My favorite story, humility.
Tell me.
There was once a man in town. Everyone knew he was the most humble man.
Yeah.
And so they had a ceremony for him, an award, and they called him up. And the moment they gave him this medal, and the moment he put it on, they took it away from him for not being humble.
I love it.
But that's part of the paradox of humility.
Yeah.
It's kind of tricky.
You can't be proud of being humble.
Yes, some people are that. It's hard. I guess what I'm saying.
And you don't try to impress people with your humility if you really are.
I would say that the problem with humility, in my opinion, is many people are trying to come off as humble. Just forget about it altogether. Just do your thing.
And actually, there are people who aren't so bad, who are trying to fit in by acting as if they're as arrogant as the quote unquote winners, and they're really not so bad, but they're doing this sort of to fit in.
No.
And so you really have to get to know people before.
Well, I'll tell you what, Victoria. I come off as very arrogant.
I don't think you do.
You know why? Because you have grace upon me. You're older, but younger people, they see me as that way.
Well, what I have,
I don't fault them for that either. I see that
with people. And I learned I thought it was irrational. And then I realized it was a grace. I notice whether people, I sort of see light coming from them. I don't see auras and colors and all that. But if there's no light in someone's eyes, and if there's something not radiant from them, I have learned not to trust them. There's something really wrong, you know.
I
And
wish I,
yeah,
wow.
and that happened one time when
Yes.
I hired someone to paint my house, and I sensed that. But he had the greatest recommendations, and he had a contract.
So you overlooked your instincts.
I overlooked my instincts, and he got out of town with my $1,000 deposit.
Well, we'll find out who those recommendations are and yell at them.
Well, turned out he'd gotten into gambling.
Okay, that was
stuff.
one time.
He'd gotten stuff. But that also helped me come to the church because I went. Herbert suggested I go to small claims court, and I had this thing, and they couldn't serve the papers because he, you know. But it seemed to me that everybody seemed to be on his side, and the mayor of the town even came to my house to tell me to drop the suit.
Someone, the painter?
Yeah. He said he's from an old family, and you know, and then he has expenses. You know, he's just kiting. He's just trying to do this and be patient and all this stuff. And he said, and his children go to the Catholic school in my town. Herb was there, and this is my husband, and he said after he left, "You call the church, talk to the priest. I'll talk to the principal of the school." And he said the way I'll do it is I'll say the kids might be having emotional problems because their father's got this, you know, this gambling problem and is getting in trouble, you know. So and when I talked to the priest, I was very shy about it. He was indignant. And he said, "I'm going to talk to the family. You will get your money back." And he said, "This is a disgrace," and so forth. And then within a week, a member of the family come to my door with a cashier's check for $1,000.
Oh, that's nice.
And the principal had, Herb had a good, so that's the church I go to now.
In Hyattsville.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So let me jump to maybe my last
but
thing.
the thing is, again, you know, people think maybe being humble is being
groveling.
Well, also being this sort of tolerance. This doesn't matter. I mean, that doesn't mean you don't express righteous indignation or react to things that
I
are
understand.
wrong.
There's a lot of
being mealy-mouthed, you know, namby-pamby. So, because I don't think humility is really understood much.
That's because it's not valued enough.
That's right.
Yeah. But
I interrupted you.
No. C.S. Lewis is my favorite author, and he talks a lot about that. So I have a profound appreciation.
What is the title? Can you?
Mere Christianity.
No, I read that one.
Which one?
The one about the people in hell getting fired.
The Great Divorce.
The Great Divorce. Okay.
Yes. Humility is a tough trait to acquire and a hard to master. You'll never master it, probably.
Well, you can't master something like that.
You can Yeah. I want to ask you now, maybe something I've always, you know what I'm interested in, how you got to meet my dad, and you can tell the story about my dad and your mom and taking. Was that when
my mother-in-law?
Was that how you got connected to my father? My dad treated your mother.
Yeah. Well, also my former husband was born in China, but he was European, and he didn't. He said that dentists in China were wonderful, and then here, you know, it was terrible. He claimed, and he wouldn't go to any but a Chinese.
Okay. Yeah, tell me a story about my dad and your mom. That story.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll tell you how I found out about your dad.
Okay, yeah, tell me.
One of my coworkers came in very late, and he said, "You know, that dentist across the street, turns out he's Chinese," and he says, "He is so nice."
What year is this?
This would be around 1984.
Oh, a long time ago.
Yeah.
40. Yeah, 40 years ago.
Yeah, before you were born, I think. Yeah. Anyway, he said that he had this terrible toothache, and he went to his regular dentist on Connecticut Avenue, who wouldn't even give him a painkiller until he put down a deposit for an exorbitant amount of money. And he was so angry that he stormed out of the office and he got close to the office, and then he noticed the shingle of your dad. He goes in, and he said, "What I've got to lose?" He said he gave him a painkiller right away, didn't charge him anything, and he just made an appointment, you know.
Yeah.
And so I said, "You say he was Chinese?"
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I got my husband to go that was wonderful. And then later on, his mother, my mother-in-law, came to live with us. She'd gotten senile dementia. She'd been at the Roosevelt, and they wouldn't let her come back after one of her episodes.
What's the Roosevelt? Is that hospital? What is
It was at that, now it's, I think, condominium. At that time, it was the Roosevelt for senior citizens.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, she was not supposed to eat certain things. And she'd sneak out and she'd go to this greasy spoon. And then she nearly died. I remember she was in the hospital in ICU. She had a aneurysm. That's what it, or a blood clot. What is it? I'm not so good with the medical terms.
Yeah.
Anyway, she lost her teeth, her dentures, which a nurse friend of mine says is common because old ladies will wrap their dentures in a napkin, put it on the tray,
Throw it in trash.
and then the aide comes and doesn't look what's in the napkin,
Okay.
Yeah.
Interrupt real quick. That happened to me.
Did it even? She's not an old lady, not a crazy old lady.
She lost her retainer.
Oh.
It was in a sushi restaurant.
Yeah. And she had taken it off. Yeah.
I went through the whole. I want to use the F word. The whole fucking dumpster. I went through every trash
You
bag.
are a good husband.
No, I wasn't married.
Oh, well. That's why she married you. You're devotion.
And I found it in all the wet. I went through all the wet and
You found it?
Yeah, the seafood. It was all disgusting. I went through every piece of trash, and I found it wrapped in there. Side note, my point is,
it can happen to anyone.
I know from firsthand experience that happens. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it
was disgusting.
That was well. Herbert taught me to drive, which was an act of courage, and you did this for M.E.A.T. That's what wins a woman's heart. These things.
Just go through it. Just dive through a dumpster. You'll win a woman's heart. I got you.
Yeah, that's all you need to do.
I wish it wasn't a sushi restaurant though. I wish it was a little.
Anything but that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I tried to put the trash bags in, they all broke from the weight of the sweat. I just scoop all the trash back in there.
I'm still trying to quote unquote digest all this.
I'm a very down to earth kind of guy, I guess. Blue collar.
Well, I don't think many blue collar people
just
would
kidding.
do that.
Anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
Go.
Hey, I just thought I'd interrupt you. I'm sorry.
No, but so you understand what happened. Anyway, so I take her to Dr. Lee, and she doesn't know where we are. It's just a nice, quiet office. And so she asked me if we're in church, and I explained, no, we're trying to get you new dentures. Doctor, your father comes out, takes her in, and then I hear the blood-curdling screams. And I think, what on earth is going on? And he comes out. She's obviously shaken, and even your dad was kind of trembling. And he said, "Your mother won't let me open her mouth. And she seems to think that it's dangerous or something." Anyway, so I said, "Oh, all right." So I get a taxi, take her back, and I'm thinking I'm going to have to feed her oatmeal, mashed potatoes. This is going to go on for the rest of her life, trying to feed her without any teeth. And then I went back to work, and I got a call from your dad, and he said, would it be all right if I paid a visit to your mother-in-law on Sunday afternoon?
Making a house call.
That's what it turned out to be. I served them tea, and they talked about China. She actually knew Chinese Mandarin quite well. Your dad actually spoke, what is
Cantonese.
Cantonese.
Not really. Mandarin, yep.
Yeah, but she had taught Chinese to Europeans, actually, in China. And they had a wonderful time, and then he had his kit with him, and he took the impression that everything was cool, and it was very interesting because I don't think he knew how modestly we lived, let's put it that way. And it turned out he charged half of what the quoted price had been. And then I had a friend, I'm not going to say who was really someone who always looked for bargains.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. And I had got some crowns. I started going, of course, to your dad, too. He said, "That's all he charges?" Well, why? So he made an appointment, and I get a call from your dad saying, so-and-so's made an appointment, says you recommended him. He said, "What does he do for a living?" And I told him. And then later on, he said, "He's a very good dentist. And I wouldn't say his prices were unfair, but they weren't any lower than anybody else's." And I thought, he's the Robin Hood of dentists.
Yeah, that's funny.
But I know your dad went to nursing homes. He did make house calls.
He was a very Generous person.
Incredible. Yeah.
Tell me about that. You told me about the funny story. You'd say that if he could tell you a joke, he'd waive the copay.
Yeah, the Pavarotti one. I didn't have to pay. And no, and I would get some jokes from my brothers.
Because you don't want to pay.
No, I didn't particularly. No. I mean, I was willing to.
I know, I'm kidding. But I'm sure my dad liked it, and you liked the fact that he liked it too.
Yeah, and I just thought it was a funny arrangement. But
Yeah.
But often the things I thought were funny, he didn't think were funny. But I knew anything that came from my brothers, he'd think was funny.
Well, he's got a guy sense of humor.
Yeah, it's a guy sense.
He likes a little vulgarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, urban.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were really. I'm not going to tell them they were funny, but they had an edge to them. Let's put it that way.
Now you also work for my father.
That was interesting too.
Tell me about, when did you start working for him?
I'm retired from the library, and
What year is this?
this was 2010, late December 2009. I started working for your dad in January 2010, and he really did need. I think Ruby was wonderful, but Ruby had left, and I was trained by somebody who was. He did end up firing her, and she sure deserved it.
This is Diane.
No, not Diane. I can't.
Miss
remember her name.
Shirley Allen. I don't know.
No, she didn't. I don't know how long.
My dad had a lot of.
He had quite a bit of turnover. Ruby was great in her way, but this one was telling me what was important and what wasn't important. I didn't understand anything. It was all new to me, and I was just trying to learn the computer system and stuff. But then there was an incident with your dad where he was in a big hurry, and he'd taken some Scotch tape and he tossed it on the desk, and she decided it was assault.
Okay.
So she goes over to him. He's walking. He's not paying any attention. I mean, he's just not thinking. And she pushes him.
Okay. I didn't know this. This sounds funny.
It was.
She pushes him.
Yeah,
And my dad must have been startled.
He was very startled. And he said, "I think you need to go home now." And she said, "Oh, right. I don't, And she was accusing him and all this stuff.
She was up in arms.
Yeah. He goes home, and the next morning.
Can I get my job back?
No, she didn't know she'd been fired. She called. She said, when can I come in? And he said, "You can't."
He knows. He can smell trouble.
Yeah, he was very good at that. And anyway, so I'm doing the work. By this time, I can manage it. And then there's this big pile of stuff. I start to look at it. And the stuff that she'd said was unimportant. These were notifications from the insurance companies approving the work. And people were calling me, and so I was calling these people to tell them that the work had been approved. And they said, "Well, I already called and came in." Or they said, "I got tired of waiting, so I just went to another dentist." And I thought, this woman cost Dr. Lee thousands of dollars.
Tens, yeah, absolutely.
And she said it was unimportant because he would never find out. She only did the work that he knew whether she would be doing it. So she was a real disaster.
Any funny stories from working with my father? Maybe even rated R when he would get angry. It doesn't have to be. It could be any story. I like those.
Well, he would laugh at people who had peculiar names. And I don't want to go into.
Yeah, he enjoys a few. He enjoys DC culture.
Yeah, he did. Oh, and he was really funny because he could do all the dances.
All okay.
And one time he came in. Apparently, he'd gone to somebody's been invited to a wedding, and he danced. And they were the African American dances, all the stuff. And I had all these people telling me, "Have you seen him?"
Dr. Lee.
So I finally, after they moved home, I said, "I got to see this." And he was poetry in motion. Who would have known?
Weightlifter, poetry in motion, dentist. Gotcha. Very, very good, diverse set of skills. Very talented, my dad.
But there wasn't that much humor because people were in pain. People don't go to the dentist to have a good time.
My dad had a good time. I'm sure you tried to make fun of.
Well, I used to tell people this is the first dance I've ever had that I enjoyed going to, you know, because he was just so hospitable and entertaining. You know, his pattern, you know, in the chair, he'd talk. Oh yeah, he first thing he made me laugh. I came to him, you know, Dr. Lee, and he explained to me he was one of the Lees of Virginia. He started talking about Gone with the Wind and all this stuff.
I don't even know what that means. It sounds
Well,
it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like something you would believe Robert E. Lee might say.
Well, these are the Virginia. That's right. Those are people who are descended from.
It sounds like royal. It sounds like royalty. Like you're descended from the king.
Kind of like that.
So he's one of
absolutely true.
So he's one of the first Lees of Virginia. My dad.
And then at that time, I was interested in Chinese horoscope. You know, teachers say that every class has a personality, which kind of goes with the year. You know, every year is kind of a personality. Anyway, I was trying to find out what year he was. He knew that. And finally I said, well, what hour? Do you remember what hour you were born? And he said, oh, Victoria, I was so young.
So he wasn't old enough to remember what hour he was born. He wasn't quite old enough yet. I got you.
But he also...
He's witty.
Very sharp as a tack. But he didn't go in for it. And he discouraged me from being interested in the horoscopes. He said, that's just superstition. But I think there's a little validity. I think that the kind of stuff you read in the newspaper is nonsense. How can everybody have the same horoscope on the same day?
Is there anything you want me, since you knew a different side of him, that you feel I should really take away from him? Maybe as a father, as a person, I said that I could kind of learn from.
Going back to prudence, his discretion.
Yes.
I think I've told you, you had no idea how much he worried about you.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. I don't. I think he came across as very laissez-faire.
And that's what he wanted. He did not want to burden you with any sense of anxiety that, you know, and a lot of parents do take away the self-confidence of children.
By exacerbating them.
Well, by communicating their anxiety about them to the point where the kid doesn't think, every world's such a dangerous place and all that.
We don't want that.
No. So I thought that was really something and required a great deal of restraint.
He was able to keep it to himself.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I don't think many parents can do that. I remember my own brother having a big fight with my mother. This was after he was grown and he was looking for jobs, and she was, as I say, fretting and agonizing. He said, you know, I don't need this. I could use some encouragement, you know.
Yes.
And she said, well, I won't worry about you anymore because you're so mean. So she went off and he was fine. And he found himself a job.
So you're saying from my father, he did a good job of compartmentalizing for me in some ways.
I guess you'd put it that way, yeah.
Like he felt this way, but he kind of, he did what was best.
Yeah. And yeah.
Do you think that, maybe I made it easier for him?
You gave him something to live for. I don't know that you made it easier.
Well, I could have been nuts and he would have had a lot more stress.
Well, you weren't a problem child.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Like, I'm sure, I guess that would help a little bit. I'm sure he might have changed his philosophy if I was a different person.
Well,
if I was going off the rails, he probably had to speak up.
In fact, he was very, very proud of you. You know, that he thought you were turning out really great. I'm not going to contradict him. No. Although I did, we did have kind of a brother-sister relationship because, you know, he didn't tell me when he thought I was using a tone of voice or something with a patient. He said, you know, that could, you know, you have to watch stuff like that. And I often, I valued what he had to say to me, and he listened. I would tell him not to talk about his personal life too much.
Oh, be careful.
Until he knew the patient.
Absolutely, 100%.
New patient. Don't tell him anything, you know. Stuff like that. So we had a really, I think, a rich and a really good exchange there.
Okay. Anything else you feel like, I you know I was asked that, but anything I don't realize about my dad that might be interesting to me?
I think you are very conscious about everything about your dad. I think you knew him well. It's, I think being, in a way, having the role reversal, being his caretaker, taught you a lot. You became, in a way, he became the child and you became the dad. And that,
I think he was very shrewd in the fact that he allowed for that to naturally happen. He wasn't like, for example, one thing that it's true, but it kind of shocked me was when I asked him, "Hey, Dad, who do you think knows more about Chinese antiques?" He says, "Son, I think you do." This has been his lifelong hobby, and he said within a matter of years,
he didn't compete with you. What he and a lot of parents do, they don't want their children to overshadow them.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted you to be the best you could be, and he was just proud. He wanted you to go beyond him. And there was nothing that would have made him happier. Just than the person, you know.
So no jealousy. That you
No.
you didn't find any sense of jealousy where you might find in other parents at times.
Absolutely none.
So he celebrated my success.
Absolutely. And when you had difficulties, he suffered probably more than you did. You know.
Hope not, because I tell
he suffered enough. Yeah.
I wasn't very happy at times about work or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a good father. He's a great father.
But he had confidence in you that you didn't.
Yeah, it was very
yourself.
interesting because he's a doctor and I'm not a doctor and I'm not as, but he showed me respect. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely.
I think that's. I think that was very unusual.
I wasn't able to quite communicate with his hands off, not burdening, but also out of respect for you.
But he also, I think he respected me. Not just was respectful. I think there was some sort of respect he had towards me, which is
he recognized you not just as an extension of himself, but as another individual worthy of respect.
Yeah,
it was remarkable.
I think for a strong person like him, that I find to be very healthy and unusual.
And I think one of the reasons his patients loved him so much is he really cared about them.
He was a very caring person.
It wasn't just a job. It was a vocation for him. I once asked him, I had read something about that most dentists are somewhat sadistic because they enjoy inflicting pain.
That's me. Actually, my dad is that way too now.
Oh, really?
Yes, you see the way he treats me. He had a little fun with it.
I don't know. He was like one of those adolescent ordeals they give as initiations to manhood.
That's Guy's sense of humor. He wanted to. I think he was messing with me or angry. I don't know what it was, but I.
No, but I really thought I have not been to another patient. I mean, another doctor, dentist as gentle, and but he really did. He really cared about all his patients.
He's very sensitive. Mm-hmm. What thing do you think I'd take after my father?
I think you have his conscientiousness. You feel like you need to, whatever you do is a vocation. Everything you do is important and you do your best. And I think that's lacking in the world today. Everything is personal ambition.
I feel that my dad and I are both kind of sentimental.
You have good hearts. Yeah. Sentimental can be superficial. I don't think there's anything superficial about either of you.
An emotional attachment at times where you might be surprised that he actually cares more about his patients than one might expect. That's what I mean by sentimental. He appreciates things more. Is that what? That's how I'm using it.
Well, sentiment. Well, I don't want to send you back to the dictionary the way I was doing.
Go ahead, yeah, send me back to the dictionary. What's the better word I'm looking for?
Empathetic,
yes.
Concerned, yeah.
But also emotional.
Yeah, well, those are emotions. Yeah,
Okay.
A genuine concern.
All right.
It wasn't, and deeply concerned, not superficially concerned.
Hey, Victoria, you know me for how long? How many years since now?
I met you when you were 2.
So
yes.
Any advice for me going forward, Victoria?
Just keep doing what you're doing.
No advice. I'm good.
No, you know what?
Yeah.
Everybody has to reinvent the wheel. Your life is yours, and you have circumstances that are you're going to have to adapt to, or whatever. I always feel like, in my case, and other people have agreed with this, my age,
Mhm.
we're formed to adapt to a world that's going to disappear as soon as we're adults.
You're very poetic. Thank you, Victoria. You're formed to adapt to a world that's going to disappear.
Yes, because it has, especially I think in our lifetime, and it keeps changing.
Well, that sounds like a humble way of looking at life. Sober way.
Sober, yeah. I think realistic.
Maybe the last question I ask is for anyone who's listening. You want anybody else that I didn't share or didn't touch upon, anything you want to share that is important to you? You may share a lot, your Ronald McDonald experience,
Well, I think I just,
some of your Catholic virtues.
well, the whole thing with being Catholic is just trusting God and surrendering, and people don't like to do that because we're all supposed to be so independent and all that.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, if you let God be strong for you, you're much stronger than when you try to be strong by yourself.
Not an easy lesson. Unfortunately, many people only learn that when it's too late.
It's never too late.
I'm sorry, Paul. They learn it the hard way as opposed to the easier way.
That's the only real way to learn. That's what I meant about reinventing the wheel. God will see to it you have all the experiences you need to make you humble.
You know what? I think about that regularly. That thought. And I keep thinking to myself, God, what kind of person do you want me to be? Why keep giving me all these lessons? Can't I just relax, God? That's why I think about that regularly.
I have a friend who, I think she's right. She is good at understanding dreams, psychology. She had a dream that she was given a certificate and said she passed. And she said, I'm not going to live much longer. That apparently whatever it was I needed to learn and do, I've done, And she's in her 80s, so that's not unrealistic.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're saying, if you want to take away anything, learn to surrender, be humble, and let God do the heavy lifting. Is that what you're saying?
And but many times it will seem like you're being put upon. And try not to resent it because, we tend to think.
Take it too personally. Is that what you're saying?
Or to think God doesn't like you when it's absolutely the opposite,
I hope I turn to gold soon. I hope I'm almost there.
No, you have a long time. But the thing is, another thing is, I think, but you live as long as you're useful as God can use you,
Wow.
So sometimes I think, when do I retire, Lord?
Yeah, you're a little older now. You're still working.
Yeah, I'm still doing a lot of things, involved in many things, But
well,
I suppose when I get useless, there's no point staying.
I'll definitely visit before that happens. I'll be visiting you. Hopefully, it won't just be all of a sudden.
Well,
when you disappear,
you certainly have given me so much in my life, and I'm looking forward to your family as it comes. Yes, be an auntie.
Yeah. So maybe we'll end the interview right there. But Victoria, appreciate always the cultural lessons you provide me with and the English classes and how to use the proper vocabulary words. Appreciate also, just a side note.
I hope I didn't embarrass you.
No, you're good. Thank you for helping me edit my book about my father.
That was a real pleasure. Because I learned so much I didn't know. It would be nice if people in different families could just get together and swap stories because I think that every sibling has different parents.
Yes. I could see me having a brother or sister have a completely different relationship with my father. And I think to myself that I didn't have the best father in the world, but he was the best father for me, for my situation. And he was what I wanted.
And looking back on my life, which I have considered chaotic and preposterous and all sorts of things, well, to my peculiar personality, those were the things that needed to happen to me. So, well,
I guess we'll end it on that note.
Okay.
Anyways, Victoria, thank you very much for your sharing.
You're welcome.
And I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I so enjoy talking with you.